Hi, I'm Daniel Peters with Mystic Emeralds, and I'm the owner of the company. We're based in Los Angeles, California, and what we do actually is we directly import emeralds from Colombia. We go down there personally, select them, and bring them back legally, and then we sell those loose on the wholesale market, and we also too take select emeralds and make custom jewelry pieces out of those. And we're partnered with a really great custom jewelry maker here, so we really like to do that. Now, I've done some other videos, as many of you may know, and one of them I did recently was on myths pertaining to emerald treatments, aka clarity enhancement. So I received a lot of great feedback on that, and it got me to thinking. In an effort to continue to try to be a resource, I wanted to address something else that I see that's a very pervasive myth in the world of emeralds and the jewelry market. And what that is the relationship between the importance of emerald color versus emerald clarity or brilliance. I'm just going to right off the bat say that my premise today is that the color of an emerald is always more important than the clarity of an emerald. In other words, emeralds are a colored gemstone, and as the name implies, color is the most important factor. So emeralds are not diamonds. Now, this may seem obvious at face value, but it's also something that seems to be lost on many people when you're out there in your day-to-day activities. And this is true even among jewelry experts and even among gemstone experts. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So before I share a couple of stories with you about jewelry industry people, retailers and the like, who seem to lose focus on the importance and significance of color in assessing the value of emeralds, I want to first justify the premise that I just stated. After all, I can't just throw it out there and not give any evidence as to why I think emerald color is so important, and indeed more important than clarity. So the first is anecdotal evidence based on my experiences. So I have two classifications of experience. One is purchasing emeralds in Colombia when I'm down there in Bogota, and I'm meeting with emerald dealers. I'm meeting with the comisionistas, the people who come and bring the emeralds and work off of commission. And then the other experience I have is on the selling end when I'm back in the United States, in Los Angeles and elsewhere, and I'm selling the emeralds. So when I'm in Colombia, I literally, within a few day period, will see millions of dollars worth of emeralds, probably hundreds of individual stones, lots or lotes, parcels, so parcels of emeralds, and like I said, millions of dollars worth of them. Now, granted, I'm not buying that many. I'm not buying millions of dollars worth, so I'm not saying I'm that big a fish. But the point is that I see a lot. And when I'm down there, the emeralds that have the best color, that have the very strong or deep green hue, very strong saturation, medium dark tone, those are the emeralds that always have the highest asking prices, without fail. Sometimes 2 to 3 times the asking price of other stones that have lighter color, but stronger brilliance or better clarity. So all things being equal, what I've noticed, the trend, is that if you have 2 gemstones, and you have one that has great color, but not perfect clarity, and then you have another that has near perfect clarity, but not perfect color, the perfect color will win out every time in terms of price. Now that begs the question, is that what the market reflects back here in the United States, in Los Angeles, and elsewhere? And what I found here is that yes, indeed, that's also reflected in the prices back in the United States. And if one takes a stroll through their local jewelry market in any major city in the United States, what one will find is that there will be display case after display case of emeralds that are very brilliant, but lighter in color. However, it's very unusual to find a display case full of very deep green hue emeralds. Regardless of clarity, it's unusual to find the color, period. And I think that speaks for itself. Now, the second form of evidence that I'm going to use that perhaps may be a little less biased, because of course that's a very subjective thing that I'm saying, but it is my experience, is the consensus among gemstone professionals. And of course there is dissent from occasional outliers, which is why I'm doing this video in the first place, but I'm talking about the general consensus. So I think a safe bet in doing this is to first start with the Gemological Institute of America, GIA. If you go on their website right now, what you'll see is that they actually have different discussions on gemstones based on category. So they'll talk about rubies, sapphires, emeralds, etc. And if you click on the section for emeralds, what you'll find is that almost the very first thing they say is that emerald value is primarily determined by color, or they say that color is the most important factor, period. Now, they do address clarity. They say clarity is important. They do address cut and also carat size, so the 4 C's. But they do say outright that color is the most important factor, not an important factor, but the most important factor. Now, the general consensus is also seen when you go on major industry websites. Most of those websites also say something to that effect. So it's not just GIA. Now, this is also supported by the feedback from many major emerald brokers. So if you just talk to people in the community, again, this is going back more on the subjective level, but many of these people have websites, and there's many noted people who also talk about the importance of color and how it's more important than clarity. Another thing I will make mention of is that there's many major auction houses in the United States, throughout Europe, throughout Asia, and most of you probably know who these auction houses are, but you can go on their websites and you can see the results of prior auctions. So if you want, you can go onto a major auction website and do a search for, say, example, emerald rings. And you can see a whole list of emerald rings and what they sold for at auction. And auctions are great because what is a better way of learning the true market value of something other than an auction where everyone's bidding, competing against each other for something that they want. So I think they're a really accurate gauge of value. And without fail, when you look at those results, the emerald jewelry that's commanding the highest prices by far is jewelry that features emeralds with the deep green hues. And it's not the emerald jewelry that has perfect brilliance but lighter color. And then finally, I would state this, just kind of as a common sense way of thinking. When you're talking about colored stones, it makes sense that color is always going to be most important. If someone is looking for perfect clarity, perfect brilliance, then they're going to shop for a diamond, or they're going to shop for a different type of gemstone. So the whole point of getting an emerald is that you want color. So I may sound redundant. What I'm saying may sound very obvious, but unfortunately, it's not to some people. And so this brings me to the real life examples of experiences I've had recently where this fact seems to be lost on some people who are actually in the jewelry industry. The first example is I met with the jewelry appraiser not too long ago, and this is someone who came highly recommended to me, but not for emeralds specifically, but just kind of in a general context. And my understanding was that this person did a lot of appraisals for wedding rings, and oftentimes for a newly married couple, and they wanted to get a wedding ring insured. So they're looking at the insurance replacement value, aka retail store value of that wedding ring. And he looked at a parcel of emeralds I had recently purchased from Colombia, and the first thing he did was he raved about the color. He said that the green was great, the hue was great, no yellow to the hue, slight blue, very green, he loved the emeralds in terms of color. He said that the tone was, or the saturation was strong, the tone was medium dark, right where it's supposed to be. But then after that, he said, I am concerned about the clarity. He said, they're just not quite brilliant enough. And I was very shocked because I knew, based on all the emeralds I see and being in Colombia, that they were actually rather brilliant, considering how deep a green hue they had and considering the tone. And they certainly were an acceptable level of brilliance that they would be considered not a very fine, but they'd be considered a fine emerald. So if I were to grade them, I would have graded them as fine. And he said because of what he perceived as a lack of brilliance, he would actually grade them in the good range, which of course people in the industry know that has a dramatic effect on value between good and fine. And so I was very confused, and I got to thinking about it. Well, the truth is, this guy looks at diamonds all day. How often does he see an emerald? And this isn't to disparage him, but it's just common sense. Most people are bringing him wedding rings. That's his bread and butter. They're diamond rings. And it's interesting to note that at one point in our conversation, he went so far as to actually make a Freudian slip and to refer to the parcel of emeralds as diamonds. So he said something to the effect of, oh yeah, well, in general, I really like your diamonds. And then he caught himself and he said, oh, I mean emeralds. So I don't think I'm making too much of that. To me, that really speaks volumes in and of itself. So remember, the point is that lots of the people you come across are working with diamonds all of the time. Even if they are an appraiser or an expert, they may not be seeing emeralds as much as you see them, depending on what you do. The second example is of an estate jewelry buyer. And this is someone who I was working with online. He lived remote, not in Los Angeles. And I was interested in selling him a piece of jewelry, and I had to send him some pictures. And I figured the only purpose of the pictures was to show him the general design, so he could see what the jewelry looked like, that sort of thing, because I know, and anybody who knows gemstones, and especially colored gemstones, knows that it's almost impossible to assess the color and clarity of a stone through pictures alone. You almost always have to see them in person. And again, especially with color and clarity of an emerald, it's even more so. So he looked at the pictures, and then we communicated, and he said, yeah, it looks okay, but I'm concerned about the emerald's clarity or its lack of brilliance. He thought that it was a little sleepy. And so I was confused because my first thought is he needs to see it in person. And I had offered to send him the piece of jewelry so that he could see it in person, and I would ship it to him. I had no issue with that. And he basically said it wasn't necessary, that my price was too high that I was asking for it, and that essentially we want to be able to come to agreement. And it's fine. Everyone has a price point. I wasn't offended. We still communicate to this day, and I may do business with them at some point. So that's fine. However, I was very struck by the fact that he was comfortable being so assured of his decision about stating that this emerald didn't have good clarity based on a picture alone. And again, I'm bringing it up because it points to how people, even in the industry, don't completely understand how the relationship between color and clarity works when it comes to emeralds. The final example I have is that right now, if you go online, there's a big website you can find that's a large online estate jewelry and loose gemstone buyer and seller. And they have a section, just like GIA, just like the GIA website, they have a section that addresses various gemstones, and they address emeralds, and they give you a summary of emeralds and how they're evaluated. Now, what's funny when you read this is that one of the first things they say is that with emeralds, clarity and color have exact equal significance in determining value. They actually say they are identical in significance. Both are the same. Color is not more important. And to me, that was very interesting because they also on their website bragged, or or boast, which is fine, about having GIA gemologists on staff. They talk about their credentials, they have GIA logo on their website, et cetera, but yet they're saying something that, when you think about it, amounts to the exact opposite of what GIA is saying. It's not just different, it's actually the exact opposite. So when you look at who's right, it's interesting to think about, okay, well, the most respected institute in the world, or one of the most respected institutes in the world, says one thing, and then you have a website with people claiming to be experts who are even referencing credentials from that institute who are saying something different. And again, I think things like that speak volumes, and they speak for themselves. So in summary, my conclusion is that the conventional logic of most color gemstone experts today, namely that color is more important than clarity in assessing the value of emeralds, is true. So when you're out there, it's important to remember this. This is why it matters. Is because if you are a layperson and you're looking to sell your grandmother's emerald ring, you may have a situation where the buyer tells you that the clarity is not good enough, they like the color, but the clarity is not there. Well, then in that case, it's important to keep this in mind. If you are an industry professional, it's important to keep this in mind. Like I said, I even experience this as someone who goes down to Colombia and buys emeralds myself, and then I sell them here. And even I experience situations where you almost start second guessing yourself, or you question, hey, are they right? So it's good to have all these facts at hand so that you can make an educated decision. And none of these people mean it bad. It's not malicious. It's not an attempt to rip you off or to give you a bad deal. I truly believe it's just a general misunderstanding that's very common. Now, as a final point, I do want to note that there are exceptions. So, people may be watching this and saying, hey, there's plenty of deep green hue emeralds that are just so foggy that you can't see through them at all. There's no transparency, there's no light coming out, there's no brilliance whatsoever. Please don't mistake what I'm saying for that, because that's not what I'm saying. So I guess the best way to summarize that is that I'm saying that a near perfect color emerald with less than perfect clarity is more valuable than a near perfect clarity emerald with less than perfect color. So I hope that makes sense. I hope that that's been helpful. I always welcome feedback. My email is daniel@mysticemeralds.com. The website is www.mysticemeralds.com. And if you subscribe to my YouTube channel, I will continue with more videos, and I hope you appreciate it. Thank you so much.